All right.
Cool. All right. My name's Isaac Ingebridtsen.
Xavier Maeda.
I'm Chloe Backer.
I'm Anna Yousif.
I'm Gavin Garramone.
And I'm Gavin Penn.
And our presentation is on Chapter 7 on the membrane components, structure, as well as function.
So the membrane components, how the topic works. The significance of this topic is to show how the membrane works and how it is important. It also explains how the membrane have to be fluid to be able to function properly, as quoted by Kane and Michael Kane in 2021. Membranes must be fluid to work properly. The fluidity of a membrane affects both its permeability and the ability of membrane proteins to move where their function is needed. Another one by Reese in 2016, another view of this can be described as when temperature decreases, the fluidity of the membrane remaining the same.
All right, so I did how the topic works and I did the structure and function. I'm going to start with the plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is a thin layer that separates all the living cells from the outside environment and is also composed of phospholipids. These phospholipids have a head that is hydrophilic and a hydrophobic tail. The plasma membrane also contains proteins that act as receptors, channels, enzymes, and etc. And some of the proteins that they have in this plasma membrane are transport proteins, which those are key hydrophilic channels to help movement all across the membrane. Some of these proteins also hydrolyze ATP, which also helps pump substances through the membrane. Some lipid proteins that help cells recognize and communicate with one another are also in the plasma membrane, and they have carbohydrates attached to them. The membrane is fluid and flexible, which allows the cells to have mobility and change their shape. And lastly, the plasma membrane has a selective permeable membrane and only allows certain substances to pass through, depending on the signals received from the cells inside. And moving on to the next slide, I did the cell membrane. The cell membrane includes a thin layer around the cell that separates the interior of the cell from the exterior environment. The cell membrane is also made up of a lipid bilayer that is only allowed that only allows certain substances to pass through because of its semi-permeability. The cell membrane has a key function, and that is to transport materials all throughout the membrane, and it allows them to exit and enter the cells while protecting the cells. It also allows them to change their shape and move freely around the cell membrane, as well as how it was in the plasma membrane. The transfer molecules in the membrane also are an effect from the lipids and the proteins in the cell membranes. And the lipids are what aids the cell to flexibility, and it protects and helps proteins assist in transferring the molecules. A type of protein group that is very important in the cell membrane are the integral membrane proteins, and they are placed inside the cell membrane. Lastly, most of them pass, but not all of them pass through.
I did what the importance of it is, and the cell membrane is an intricate structure that is designed to act as a barrier between the inside and outside of the cell. The first thing that you need to understand is how it's made up of a phospholipid bilayer with hydrophilic exterior and hydrophobic interior, and it creates a fluid viscous border protecting from supporting the cell. And the bits of cholesterol within the phospholipid bilayer help it maintain its uh, structure and changing temperatures. The border doesn't always keep inside and outside separate. The membrane selective permeability. So the cells are able to regulate and maintain proper balance of ions, nutrients, and everything else that help maintain the cell's homeostasis. The membrane also contains multiple proteins to help substances cross in and out of the cell. And cells can also recognize each other through glycolipids and glycoproteins on the surface of the cell. So in short, the cell's membrane plays a crucial role in holding the cell together, regulating what goes in and out of it, and cell-to-cell recognition.
All right, so for examples of an application, I went ahead and did active transports on sodium potassium pumps. So there are two types of transports. There are passive and active. In this example on this slide, I will be focusing on the active transports. For active transports, energy, usually in the form of ATP, is required to move substances against their concentration gradients. This type of transport is performed by specific proteins embedded in the membranes. A specific type of active transport I'd like to talk about is the sodium-potassium pump. As seen in the diagram below, there are 6 steps to this process. In stage 1, the cytoplasmic sodium binds to the sodium-potassium pump. The affinity for sodium is high when the protein has this shape. Stage 2, the sodium binding stimulates phosphorylation by ATP. Stage 3, phosphorylation leads to a change in protein shape, reducing its affinity for sodium, which is released outside of the cytoplasm and into the extracellular fluids. Stage 4, the new shape of the pump has a high affinity for potassium, which binds on the extracellular side and then triggers release of the phosphate group. In stage 5, the loss of phosphate group restores the protein's original shape, which has a lower affinity for potassium. And finally, in stage 6, the potassium is released, which would make the affinity for sodium high once again. This cycle will continue to repeat over and over again. So the sodium-potassium pump is a classic example of an active transport system.
Yeah, so I got the other type of transport system. Seen here is the passive transport system. The system is passive rather than active because it requires no energy output or ATP. One of the most important examples seen in any science is osmosis, which is the transfer of cells from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration in order to achieve and create equilibrium. This movement is passive, meaning that this transport system happens at a natural rate. No energy means no immediate change. This example shows a high concentration of carbon dioxide on the left side and a low concentration on the right. Passive transport means that the CO2 on the left side wants to move to the right side in order to have an equal amount of carbon dioxide on both sides. Passive transport has no stages, and unlike active transport, happens at no particular rate.
So yeah, I got the Christian worldview component. The Christian worldview has a very strong and powerful outlook of the world. It stems from deep faith in the Lord above and the beauty in his creation. It is important to note that it is not only beautiful in sight, but also beautiful in science. Taking a deeper look into biology, membranes specifically, it is amazing to see the detail and precision that is required. Between all of the microscopic but significant components like the cytoplasm, ATP, or even osmosis, it is astonishing to witness and research the power of science. For some, when diving deeper academically, they seem to see it as proof of atheism and evidence of a scientific worldview of the world. However, those with the Christian worldview see it as evidence of God and his omnipotence. It is very important when conducting academic research to remember to not stray away from this worldview and to acknowledge that science is not proof of God's absence, rather proof of God's greatness. Another important thing when conducting research is to remember God's wishes of humankind. One of Jesus' most clear teachings was to do no harm, especially to others. In some instances, research can be dangerous and have harmful outcomes to participants, especially when conducting on humans and their membranes. It is necessary to retain a Christian worldview and ethical guideline when conducting these research to ensure not only the safety and well-being of participants, but to also honor the Lord and his wishes. With this, one can participate in academic research while still holding true to the Christian worldview.